Well, hey there, everyone. Welcome to week 6. So we are now well into the stress section of this, and this week we cover the second part of the Harvard booklet, just to understand a little bit more about. Well, we've covered the pathophysiology part of it and um, the manifestations of stress on chronic illness and so forth. And there's a really good discussion from week 5 about just some great questions. And what did you learn? And it was mostly centered around the connections there that we have, the pathophysiological stress response, the connection that is with our head and the rest of our bodies. I guess if you want to look at it that way. So this week in the Harvard booklet, it goes a little bit further and talks about the relaxation response, and I think it's a good idea to pay some close attention to that technique, and just by way of a little bit of background, we used to cover this in quite a bit of detail in our undergraduate program. And we just don't really have a lot of time to do it in the master's program. But I wanted to make a few comments about this, and this is because it's got an interesting story. The founder of the relaxation response, which, by the way, the overall technique is not new to the last several decades, but because it's essentially a meditation practice, has been around thousands of years. But what I think is important about it is, interestingly, we are always skeptical until we can have at least some data or research to prove that something we're doing is actually effective, and that is the beauty of the relaxation response. So Herb Benson was a Harvard researcher who I had the opportunity to meet several times and be in small classes with many years ago, which was just a great thrill for me anyway. But anyway, so he developed a technique to really focus on, as you will read, focus on a word or a sound or a phrase, a very short phrase if you do it that way, that elicits a response that is opposite of the flight or fight response. And the irony of the whole thing, or maybe it's just coincidental, but the lab that he did most of his initial research in was the same lab that the opposite response was discovered in at Harvard. So the fight or flight response, the initial research on that, on both of these opposite stress responses, was done out of the same lab. Kind of interesting. So essentially, as you will read, it's just thinking about putting yourself in a quiet place, like we've done in meditation. You choose a word, and it can be anything that's meaningful for you, or it doesn't even need to be meaningful. You can just choose like a number, and just repeat the word or phrase, short phrase or sound over again, and you just bring your attention to that particular word. And then when your thoughts come in, you just passively dismiss them and go back to your word. Okay, so that's it. I mean, we've talked about this many times already, and that this is the essence of a meditative practice, is that you are essentially turning your thinking mind off, and at least or at least getting it to focus on something in particular. Maybe it's your breathing, maybe it's your heartbeat, maybe it's a sound you're hearing outside, but it's the mind-wandering squirrel brain thing is what you're trying to turn off, or at least down-regulate for a short time. But what the relaxation response has been able to show, and then as further they went on to develop the Benson Henry Institute at Harvard and Mass General to do the research on this technique, was that you could take nearly any medical condition and improve it by using the relaxation response. And so what this did was say, okay, there's one particular kind of meditation practice that has been shown to have some great correlation. And I think it goes beyond correlation for all you statistical gurus out there. But some great benefit for improving health in many ways. But I think what we understand now is it goes beyond the relaxation response and is to, I think we can say more generally, meditation in general helps to improve physical conditions. So really the point of the first couple weeks, or I guess the half of the stress piece that we're covering, is for you to try to make a connection between stress and it being really a perceived occurrence. Okay, this is a really important concept with this with stress, is that, and I'll just digress for a second, but if you have two identical stress occurrences for two different people, that each person will interpret the stress differently, and that interpretation will have a different physiological stress response. A manifestation of the interpretation of the stress will be different. Okay, so one person may interpret a situation as more highly stressful, and that will cause a cascade of physiological responses as due to that. And the other person with the identical stress situation could interpret it differently, as in not as stressful, and that give other stress responses that, as the research has shown, aren't as challenging or as devastating or detrimental to the body as far as physical illness goes. This concept of perception is really important for us because that means we have hope, and it gives us, it's not necessarily the stressor itself, it's how we perceive the stress. Okay, and I want to make a cautionary point to this, because sometimes people will say, okay, if you have stress, then you know what, just, it's no big deal, you just need to get over it, that kind of thing, or almost like a dismissive, you get too uptight about things, you're too stressed out, you need to be able to, handle yourself better. It's almost like saying to somebody, you're overweight, you just need to lose weight, you just need to eat better and exercise. That kind of advice is, obviously not effective and of the past, as is the same for stress. If you say to somebody, just get over it, kind of derisively about, just saying, hey, it's no big deal, just, get past it. There's more to it than that. So I just want to caution you to go down that road, not to put all the blame, the victimization onto the individuals who's experiencing the stress by just saying it's all in your head and you need to, stop doing that. Okay, so there's more to it than that. Essentially, the overall message to this, hopefully we'll get to by the end of class, is that it is a letting go process. And that is the overarching message about stress, is a letting go. As that is the primary reason we're doing meditation, is when those thoughts come in, to just dismiss them and let them go. That process is really helpful in stress, and that is the essence of it. But it isn't to say, dismissing the individual who's experiencing stress and articulating how stressed they are, and you just say, come on, man, just get over it. So I hope you can recognize the difference there. So, because I digressed like that, I can't even remember where I was on the tangent before, but I think it was about talking about the relaxation response, and then expanding that sense of what meditation is, and how meditation, or just in general, meditation can be relative to the stress response. And so the first couple weeks of this piece really focuses on trying to make those connections between the pathophysiology and what it does to affect our bodies and how closely connected they are. And then in this week, week 6 is moving forward and saying, okay, there are ways that we can mitigate those chronic illnesses that are a result of stress by doing certain things. And there are many, right? I mean, so you'll read if you haven't already, you'll read in this booklet, there are many, many techniques, many strategies that we can use to help mitigate stress. So one of those that, of course, that we use in this class is meditation for lots of reasons, but one of those being the mitigation of stress. But there's many others that we can use. We know for sure that one of the greatest techniques we can use is consistent exercise. There are many have described exercise as basically a controlled stress experience, physiological stress experience for your body, so that so you're putting your body into a stressful situation, whether it's walking or running. I mean, you're doing something other than sitting and laying and being sedentary. So your body has to respond to that. So there's a physiological stress that is put on your body from that. But it's very controlled, and your body has a way to respond to it. And there are a lot of people who feel, and I tend to agree with this very much so, that those consistently controlled stressors that we do with exercise helps us to manage stressors that come about that are less controllable, where we have a situation, maybe it's a family situation, maybe it's a very short-term thing, like you're late for work or, something like that. But it helps us to manage, it helps our body respond more positively to that. So exercise is a big one that is in our toolbox for dealing with chronic stress. So then, hopefully as we keep moving forward into weeks 7 and 8, that we can get into really this larger conversation about stress, and that why are we why are we having such issues with stress in this country, in America? But it's not just, it's a worldwide epidemic now that we have chronic stress. And the story is very complex, and it's too much to get into even in this 4 weeks that we're talking about it. But what I hope to do is to give you a broader perspective about where it comes from, perhaps at its more of its core. And so this conversation really, in my mind, goes to looking at the structural issues that cause us stress. So all those things out there that make us feel some sort of stress, emotional, psychological stress. And then, so we're looking at the structure. So how our job is set up, what our family dynamics are, what the way the economy is set up, our education system, the government, all of the institutions, healthcare, that cause us to have stress. But then the other story of this is what's going on internally too. So it's a both and conversation. It's not where, it's stress, where some people believe, oh, stress is going to go away or be significantly decreased if we just fix, let's say, the healthcare system. It's a dysfunctional system, and it could get a whole lot better stress if we fix that system, of course. But it's not the only piece of the story. There is also some internal responsibility we have too to managing stress, and how I like to refer to that as our intention, our intentionality, our desire to move in a direction that is something that is forward or better. I'm in this case talking about stress. A few years ago, I wrote a book called Chronically American. And that was really the first story. It was the first part of the story is looking at the structure of our institutions and how that really is at the core of causing stress. And it tells a story about how we got from there to here and why we're in this mess we're in, I think is probably an okay way to say it. With stress. But then I just finished one this last spring. It was published, called Posturing Towards Wholeness. And that is really the interiority story there. So it's on one side we have the structural, on the other side we have the good work that we need to keep doing within ourselves, and both come together. Both are part of the story. They're not opposites. They are, in fact, one and the same conversation that need to be happening simultaneously in order for us to get to a place where we feel like we can more manage our stress in a more peaceful and a way that helps not just our physical health, which we tend to talk about mostly, but overall in our grand scheme of what I'm referring to as wholeness. So that is where we're getting to a little bit with the Compassionomics book that we're going to start into next week. If you haven't already started to read it, there's a lot there. And there was just a new book that the same authors published. I'll hopefully be able to talk about this at the same time in the next couple of weeks, called The Wonder Drug. So the same two authors that published Compassionomics just published a book called The Wonder Drug, and essentially goes to the same conclusions about what we can do to mitigate our stress and to spill the beans. And this is not new news to anybody, but we're really talking about, if you want to get to the core, this is about relationship. This is about our connection with each other, with the natural world, our spiritual connection, our connection with ourselves. If we can move in this direction, then we simultaneously do the interior work and the exterior work at the same time. And so I think that has been a perennial message for millennia, that this is about relationship. This whole life thing with the big L, this life big L thing is about relationship. So that's where we're moving in this direction. And my hope with this class, at least with the stress piece, is not just to do the tinkering piece of it, which is important. The tinkering piece would be these things that, and I say it most lovingly because that's mostly what we do in lifestyle medicine, is tinker. But doing the exercise to help mitigate stress, for example, and those are our techniques that we have to help mitigate, to help dampen, to help improve. But it's not transformational. It's not getting us to a place that puts us in a whole new realm, where we're hopefully referring to this new realm as something in the language of wholeness, which seems to make sense for me. So if we can move from a tinkering to a transformation, then we've really done some movement on our way forward for trying to alleviate where stress, isn't an issue. And will we get there? I think it's unrealistic to say, hey, I'm going to live my life without any stress at all. I don't think that's possible. And I don't think that's probably even healthy, because we do need some stress, in some ways. But so it's a different way of seeing if we can get to the transformational piece. And that has a direct relationship on stress, which then has a direct relationship on our physiology, as we now know. So that's hopefully where we're headed in the next couple of weeks before we end this class. And so if you have any questions, let me know. I'm looking forward again to the great discussions. The first discussion we had on stress I felt was really good, and there's a lot of good points came up. So keep up the good work, and I will talk with you soon. Thanks.